Two Guys, One Shaker Cup podcast, hosted by Joshua Shaw and Ryan Buckeye.
Here we are, Josh Shaw. We're back on the airways. I'm actually finally established in a place of, I don't know, it's like a safe haven in here. I mean, I don't have the green grass in the background, but I do have my cool little FI thing back. I have a window. I mean, that's cool, right? I mean, I have a window, and you have you. You have Josh Shaw.
I just have me in the same old green grass. Yeah, it's boring. I know. You're the one that had all the news this week with the move, and people could have saw on your social media all the snow that you guys got, which
you miss
is
it.
disgusting.
Tell me, and tell the world that you miss the Ohio snowfalls.
I don't miss anything about the seasons in Ohio. Even though, I mean, every once in a while it'd be nice for it to cool down here. It is actually cooler in Texas today, but for the most part, it's always hotter and hottest.
Yeah, and you're choosing to potentially build to stay in Texas. I mean, that's the type of climate that you're in. You like that kind of stuff. Josh Shaw thrives in that type of world, hence why your hair is always so perfect, because you have the humidity. It's I don't know what humidity actually does to the hair, because I don't keep up with that stuff. But what I do keep up with, and what you keep up with, is the sports nutrition industry. And there's a topic that I've been thinking about for a couple weeks, especially since we had Aaron Singerman on the show, and he had dropped the news here, I think before anybody else actually on this podcast, that Redcon 1 will be going into Walmart, which, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a shock to me. I think in the beginning his mindset was like, we're not a Walmart brand potentially in the beginning. I thought I've heard him say that in the past, but now that Redcon is going into Walmart, and we've seen other brands on Walmart store shelves, and I guess let's start the conversation with this. Like, when I say the brand name Walmart, what does that mean to you as a consumer, Josh?
I think it's changed a lot. If you would have asked me that question, even a few years ago, I probably would have answered it much differently. But for me, I think it's not your parents' Walmart, I guess, in the sense of being, super low cost, even though that is still one of their strong propositions. But they've really broadened their merchandising. They've really leaned into omni retailing. So a lot of what is happening with online is really broadening their customer base. So they have to really bring that on into the store, because there needs to be some type of parity between store and online. If their online merchandising is all like high-end premium stuff, and then you go into a store and it's super discount, people would be confused. So I think that anybody that is thinking about Walmart in a yesteryear perspective, they're missing the boat. Mm-hmm. Though it's still that place that you can get, low-cost things. It's still that neighborhood market. A lot of times in small towns, it is the spot, you know what I mean, where you can get your groceries, also the spot where a lot of the people work at. It's one of those kind of community building areas. But I think for our space, if people just look at it as, oh, my brand would never fit in there because I'm not a low cost, I'm not this cheap, I don't want to water down my stuff, it takes away the cool level, I think they're missing the boat completely.
That's the big thing. You said water down. And let's be real. A lot of the products that you find on Walmart shelves are a different product than what you're going to find potentially at the brand's website. Or Muscle Tech, for instance, right? We talk about them quite a bit. They have a line specifically formulated for that channel. I mean, they have, I think, 3 different tiers of products now, and one of them happening to be there. I think Cellucor is very similar. There's Iovate, there's Nutrabolt. Redcon, kind of an anomaly. They're not changing anything, which is great. But I think the answer that you would have answered, or your response 2 years ago or 4 years ago, is a response or a point of view or a stigma that still exists with Walmart today to a lot of consumers. Now, you obviously are way more educated on omnichannel and what Walmart and Walmart.com is doing within the space and how it's changing as they're trying to go fight the fight against Amazon. But I think a lot of consumers still think, okay, Walmart is that concrete floor, like low income people shop there. Like that's, if I shop at Walmart, if I get seen at Walmart, like people are going to judge me. I mean, that's stupid. It really is stupid. But that does exist. I mean, I think about my hometown. We had a Kmart. I don't know if you remember Kmart's, Josh. Yeah. I mean, you probably do. Most people listening to this are probably like, fuck is a Kmart? But then we got a Walmart, and it put Kmart out of business. Like, that's the power that Walmart has. And it's not just Walmart, it's Target. I mean, it's other stores too. So the theme of this podcast is as we look at this, does it impact the point of view on the brand? Do you look at the brand, or do you think the brand now loses some of its coolness if they're on the store shelves at, say, a Walmart. Now, let's start with so Iovate, for instance, Muscle Tech. I mean, in your opinion as a consumer, so take off your consulting hat. Like, would you buy the products at Walmart that are on the shelves from, say, Muscle Tech or Cellucor?
Now, am I also assuming that I don't have any other prior, like I don't have all that other information as, a consumer for the last 20 years?
Right. I would say that your knowledge on dietary supplements probably give you the right to say no in that case if that's what you want. I mean, I wouldn't. I'll be honest. I wouldn't buy it. But then again, I don't hold it against the brands for being there. I totally understand why they're there. But I think I have made the comments in the past, like, being these brands are just watering down their formulas for Walmart and just stay the hell away from it. I've said that on record, and I'll say it on the record here. Like, I wouldn't buy, nor would I recommend somebody go buy a product's brand or a brand's product at Walmart. I just wouldn't.
I think where everybody gets kind of tripped up on this is that, somebody that's asking you a question is a much more advanced user, even if they're not, in your eyes. If you look at them and they ask a question, you think, well, that was a silly question. They should know that. Comparable to somebody that would never even know to even ask you a question, that they're so far more advanced. So for them, it might not make sense for them to buy something at a Walmart or some other mass retailer because they're already past the point of knowing they need to ask a question. They want to get better. They want to buy the right product, so they care. But a lot of people, maybe they have no understanding. Maybe they go to Planet Fitness. Maybe they just started at Planet Fitness and somebody told them, hey, you should try pre-workout. They're at Walmart buying the groceries and it's there. Mm-hmm. For them to go and try to do research and try to figure all that stuff out, it's just a friction point. So they're there. It's something on shelf. It seems like it's going to work well for them. And that's like their entry point. So instead of it being, $35, their entry point is $18. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of people, that is the starting point. Now, over the next 6 months, if they continue at Planet Fitness and they're getting in shape and they're loving what they're doing, odds are they're going to probably start following some influencers online. They're going to start to look at maybe some articles on bodybuilding.com or something like that. And all of a sudden, then they start to get a little bit more advanced and they think, okay, I need to move away from this $18 pre-workout. Maybe I need to go and buy it at somewhere else, and I think that that's where a lot of people get tripped up because you do want to have entry points at different, levels. It's not necessarily somebody can just go from 0 to 100. It's very hard for the majority of consumers, especially ones that are just trying to get into the space, to do that. It would be too complicated. And honestly, they wouldn't even get the biggest amount of benefit anyways out of some of these things because they're not even probably working out to the level that these things would be as much of a useful as somebody else.
Yeah, I think your point on entry point is valid 100%, right? Like, walk down the aisle, you're grabbing a box of Quest bars, you're grabbing a pre-workout, you're grabbing Body Force or whatever the hell the protein is that they carry there for the very first time. But then, yeah, you're right. Like, if this becomes a routine or a lifestyle for that consumer, they're eventually going to ask questions, and they're going to be educated. And you have to start somewhere. Like I said, I've said, I think on this podcast before and other podcasts, one of the first dietary supplements I ever bought came from a magazine that included Mike the Situation from the Jersey Shore. That's not any better than going down the aisle at Walmart and buying something. And in fact, going down the aisle at Walmart and buying something is probably better than what I did, And but you got to start somewhere. And I don't have, from like a consumer perspective, sure, I'm not going to Walmart. I'm not buying that. If somebody picks one up from Walmart and asks me what I think of it, I'll obviously give them my honest opinion. But it is a little bit different because you and I both know that you need to reach a certain price point to get on the shelves at Walmart in order to give them the points that they need and in order to fit their pricing model. And so when I hear Aaron saying we're not going to change the formula, then you start thinking, and this is me not making any accusations at all, but you start thinking like, okay, well, how much does that formula cost in the first place? That they can afford not to change it to get on Walmart shelves. Now, in Aaron's case, in Raycon's case, there is a high demand for that brand. And I think that he's probably able to ask potentially for maybe a little bit more. I don't know. He never pitched to Walmart. You might have been in some meetings before Walmart. I'm not really sure how those conversations go. And the reason why we're focusing on Walmart, I think, on this conversation is because they're generally seen as the low-cost provider in the space because they use an everyday low-price model, which we could have a whole podcast on how that works. But it does then bring up the question, which people in the niche space, in our space that we cover, the hardcore supplement geeks and nerds are going to right away say, well, that just proves that formula is junk, or that proves that formula doesn't cost any money. I don't know if that's a valid argument. I'm not saying that his formula is expensive. It's not expensive compared to some out there, but I don't necessarily think that you can just say it's a pennies formula. You got to remember the volumes that a brand like Redcon, the volumes that a brand like Nutrabolt does that can drive down their costs.
I agree. And I think that the other way to look at it, even not necessarily from the cost side, is what you mentioned around it being in demand, people going in there. And why, when you asked the first question around, my thoughts of Walmart, I started to bring up things around Omni, and I started thinking about the website, because with these retailers now, they have some more data available to them to know how are things selling online, which is a much more safer merchandising pick for them. Right. Sometimes they buy wholesale. Sometimes it's just sold as a third-party seller on some of these marketplaces like Walmart or Amazon. But ahead of time, what's the demand? How do you feel like your customers are already picking it up online? And it makes you have more confidence then to stock it in store, because that there's going to be a level of both people buying it in store, but also a lot of these retailers, Walmart hasn't really moved to this yet, but Target as an example, like where they ship from store. So they do know that there's going to be a level of turns organically coming in the store, but they also know we're going to be able to ship, X amount of these in the current kind of zip codes based around these store locations. And it makes a lot more sense to have that on shelf other than one more kind of cheap made or whatever product. And there's also just like a diversity of brands, I think, that these merchandisers are starting to look for. The ones that are on the Walmart shelves or Target shelves or whatever, a lot of them are made from brand manufacturers that are kind of duplicates. You know what I mean? There's only a few of them that make up all of those brands, and they're the biggest ones, the ones that have scale, to your point around getting the cost down. But those aren't necessarily the ones that have like total demand across all categories of buyers. So then you start to get into this where you're only feeding the same amount of the funnel. You're only feeding the same type of customers. And eventually you want to get a broadening of your customer base, especially when you have like data to support it. Mm-hmm. The second, or I don't know what point I'm on now, I'm sure I'm on point 100, but like with GNC and Vitamin Shop and specialty retail struggling and consumers looking to shop elsewhere or just buying a bunch of things based around convenience or price points or wherever they want to shop at, you have people that are not necessarily just looking for the low cost sometimes in those categories. They're used to buying something at $49.99 at GNC. Now they're over at Walmart and they're like, $35 seems pretty cheap to them, or $30 seems pretty cheap to them. And you need to have those kind of on shelf to capture that customer. If somebody's used to buying it at $50 and there's an $18 one and that's it, odds are they're just going to think, this is too cheap, it's not for me, I'm not going to pick this up. So it helps them at least get some of these new customers that are shopping in store in these categories.
Very much so. I'm thinking in terms of, I can't remember the number that Aaron threw out, and I think we had that conversation on this podcast in terms of what a Walmart deal means to a brand in terms of a bottom line. I don't know if he said the number 100 million or not. I know we were talking about MRE, RTD one time, and I think that was like $100 million potential category business for him. But do you know from all the research and stuff that you've done, what does essentially, on average, one SKU at Walmart, nationwide distribution, equate to an annual revenue?
That's tough.
I mean, obviously, there's different price points.
Yeah, there's so many different price points, different types of products.
I think the answer is a lot. I mean, if you're at least turning, it's a lot. I
would assume if you are on shelf at Walmart in a relatively fast-moving category, you're looking at, and you stay on shelf throughout the year, and you kind of pull all those levers. Top line, I think you're looking at probably about $20 million, probably, and then
for one SKU.
as you take those SKUs, as you take those kind of categories of products. So if you had multiple flavors on, I think it still would be around the same number. But if you were to kind of jump those around, so if you had say five SKUs on there, which would be huge, that's not something that's normal with the Walmart. You would be looking at probably about $100 million, probably, and that's there's so many other determinants. Is that brand moving very quickly? Is it you could do $100 million in one SKU if you really wanted to. So
you beg the question, if you're a consumer and you're listening to this podcast and you're like wondering why brands do this, ask yourself the question, are you cool with $100 million in your pocket? I mean, I think most of us would be now, and then they could be like, well, I have morals. There's nothing morally wrong about being at Walmart. There's nothing morally wrong about being at Target. Honestly, and this is coming from the guy who's been preaching freaking formulas since day one. There's nothing wrong with changing your formula to meet a channel. There's not. And my job is to let people know what I think of that product. I don't care if Iovate or Nutrabolt does it. Good for them. They should. You have to change your strategy for the different channels that you're in. Like, you can't, there's not a one size fits all. I mean, some places, obviously there is, I guess. But I mean, for the most part, you need to think strategically and differently for different retailers sometimes, for different channels, whether it's online or if it's brick and mortar. So for anybody who actually, shits on a brand for going into Walmart, shame on you. Like, honestly, like, you need to broaden your perspective, broaden your line of sight on what this means to the brand, what this means to their families, what this means for people who can't afford a $40 price point and they just want something. So maybe a $20 pre-workout's for them. And if that's what they want, if that's what's going to give them potentially that placebo or that kick in the ass to become healthier, who are we to say no?
Yeah, I get a lot of questions around, like, what do you think of this product?
They ask you that, Josh? They ask Josh Shaw what they think of.
They don't. I mean, not around the formula, but it's mostly around like the business use case around that. And I always say, for the intent of this product, it is great. It's properly priced. It's properly formulated for the consumer base. It's in the appropriate channels. I start going through that, and that's how I tend to like decipher what's a good product or not a formula, because that formula doesn't necessarily, if it's not matched up with all the other pieces, it doesn't make sense. It's not a great product for me, because I only look at it from a business case. I don't really think about it from like, this has 2 grams of this and 3 grams of that and whatever. I'm more looking, and nobody's going to ask me those questions anyways. They ask me about the business side of it. So I always look at the intent, like you were mentioning. There has to be the strategic alignment on all these things, or it doesn't work. If you go in there and you try to push your weight around on somebody like Walmart, and not necessarily just Walmart, but Walmart's customers, and you don't fit the bill, you're not going to work. It's not going to work out for them. And this is going to be, kind of bringing it back to the Redcon situation, it's going to be kind of interesting because they are leading the way on this new wave of Walmart. And it's not necessarily new, because there's a lot of other retailers that have already kind of jumped into more premiumization of like the category and not necessarily thinking about it just as like the low cost leader. So Walmart's a little bit slower to this, but I think Walmart being the biggest supplement retailer in the world, it's very important to see how this works out, to see if there can be some products on there that have some kind of midline price points. I wouldn't call them premium, kind of premium for Walmart, but not premium for the category. And it's interesting to kind of see how that goes, because I think they're going to really champion that and see how that goes. And if that works out really well, I think a lot of people should be rooting them on, because then that creates some more opportunities for other brands to kind of jump in behind that and take that and really use it to their advantage in their storytelling when they're at some of these meetings. But it will be interesting, and I think that the biggest thing to think about when any brand is kind of considering any of these choices, and this could even, I made a video recently around like the dollar channel, dollar stores. People, it blows people's mind, because they're like, why would I want my brand ever be in a dollar store? And they don't realize that these dollar stores are literally the fastest growing retail channel in the United States. They have, tens of billions of dollars in revenue, and they have more like locations, retail points of distribution than everybody outside of convenience locations. So it's one of these things where if you get into one of those stores, the potential is so massive. Now that takes a much different strategy than, Redcon could go on there and $35. It doesn't work like that, but they could create like a half size MRE bar and have that on shelf for $1.19, and it will work out really well for them. So it's one of those things to kind of think about and try to look at it from the consumer's point of view. The consumer really drives the market today. It's not brands. There's no longer a push that works all that well. It has to be counteracting with the demand, a pull, because consumers really have the power in the market. There's so many choices. There's so many substitutes. And they're going to find what they want based around whatever their set of criteria is, and they're going to shop where they want, when they want, however they want. It's kind of like pick your own adventure in the world today. Like consumer really gets to just like decide where they want to be in the game and kind of play it how they want. But people that are stuck in like this prehistoric days of like, oh, well, I can only be in these specialty stores and I can only be, now online. Those are the only two things that fit because my brand is super cool and super authentic about all this. Like, it doesn't work like that anymore. It's not going to work because at each day the market shifts. So, in 2 years, we're going to look at all those brands that thought they were super cool and they're not going to be in business anymore.
I would love to be a fly on the wall for the first conversation that a sports nutrition brand had with Walmart. Like, how'd that conversation go? Because I'm sure they had preliminary conversations. I don't even know when Walmart first brought in like protein powders and pre-workouts. I think it's within the last 10 years, right? I mean, it's got to be somewhere in that time frame.
Yeah, I'd imagine it's probably from some of the bigger people, like even some of the legacy brands we've talked about before, Metrics or EAS or, a Glambia brand or an, Iovate brand or whatever it was kind of
right.
earlier named.
It would be super interesting to be like, okay, how'd that conversation go and where did it start? And then how did it evolve into the model because to your point, I think that model is changing a little bit now because they are doing more of the quote unquote premium-ish type of stuff with, Total War being probably the first one. And I want to go back to where you said people should be rooting them on. Absolutely. Absolutely. Like if they're able to establish a pricing tier, a pricing structure for a premium-ish brand, imagine the doors that could get open. I mean, there are certain brands that will just never be on a Walmart shelf. We know that. They're the brands who put so much money into formulation, not much money into marketing. Those brands won't make it there. But there are brands like a brand like Ghost could be at Walmart. Like they could. And I don't know if Dan and Ryan would ever do it. But I think if they're able to do the errand thing and not have to change much of their stuff, I don't necessarily see why they wouldn't at least consider it. But who knows? I mean, we'll see what Redcon does. But I definitely feel that brands out there, even if you have a dislike for Redcon or anybody involved in that company, but you own a supplement company, a brand, and you're in that sort of mid-tier premium type product, you should obviously be watching this closely and you should go to Walmart and buy the damn thing. You should seriously support the cause as much as you can because if that's successful, it then will open doors for you to be successful in the future. So it will be, I know Aaron and I know the team at Redcon, they have a whole finance department. I guarantee they went back and said, okay, with a Walmart commit on a PO, our volumes are going to increase by X, Y, Z. Therefore, our costs are going to go down by this. We are going to be, perfectly fine to give Walmart whatever they need for a price break on it without having to change the formula. They're not stupid, right? I mean, they got a massive building in Boca Raton that they have, plenty of employees. Now, someone like me with, say, my butter line, I don't have the resources to go back and run all those numbers. I'd have to, lean on people in my network and say, hey, they're going to do this. What's it going to? But I would still at least do the exercise to the point that I could to see if I could reach a price point. Sometimes I feel like people are either too lazy, they don't have the knowledge, or they just straight up say, nope, you're Walmart, I'm not interested. Obviously, there's not a lot of brands that probably get approached or even have approached Walmart to be in it. I mean, off the top of my head, I can think of ProSups, Glambia brands, Iovate brands, NutriBullet brands, and now Redcon, Quest, Lenny and Larry's, things of that nature. But in terms of powders and pills, there really aren't as many brands as there are in their space. There's 3 or 4 of them at Walmart.
Yeah, it's pretty centralized right now, and I think it's most around not necessarily the merchandising that would work in the store. I think it's more around the business being able to your point, actually handle it. So when you all of a sudden turn on, say, 4,000 locations that that are huge locations, it's not like these are small things where you're potentially moving pallets of products a month. In some of these cases, you have to really realize the cost that goes in just from servicing any of that, but also just the resources that need to be in-house just to do all the little odds and ends and pushing paper around and POs around and all that kind of stuff. There's so many little things that come up as the level of complexity kind of increases in the business. So Walmart is one of those customers that they do a lot of heavy lifting because they've obviously been able to streamline a lot of things. They know how things need to be done. They're going to be very strict in terms of how you need to handle their business, but it does kind of bring up the point of just you have to really have the back end of your business a lot more in check and the cash flow, capitalization, all that kind of stuff, because if not, you're dead in the water. It has nothing to do with really is your product going to fit or not. It's like if you don't have all that stuff in the kind of locked up, you're done.
The one thing that we didn't talk about, but is extremely important, maybe one of the most important factors of this whole thing, is stock and supply, because you cannot have a stock out for somebody like Walmart. Like they are not going to have patience for that. And Aaron and Redcon, again, we're going to speak a lot on them because they're kind of championing this model. They don't produce their own products. They use co-mans, right? So they have to have conversations with their co-mans who does their products and say, like, we need to be tight on this. And if we need something, created tomorrow, we need to make sure we get line time for it. Obviously, I think they're a big enough company that they probably can do that. But you understand, like, with that comes time. It comes making sure raw ingredients are where they need to be. It's a very complex supply chain to be in Walmart. It's not just easy to say, awesome, we got Walmart, let's make it happen. Because I don't know how many, a cat gets 9 lives. I don't think you get 9 lives at Walmart. I think you might get maybe 1 if you're lucky, because they expect, I believe they expect perfection from their vendors, because they strive to be the best of the best in the category in which they play. So the amount of complexity that goes into a deal like this, and maybe be interesting to at some point to bring Aaron or people involved in that process back on, or even somebody from Iovate or Nutrabolt that deals with the Walmart accounts, to just explain the level of complexity that goes into a deal the size of Walmart. Because we keep talking, like, we talk GNC, we talk Vitamin Shop, great accounts, obviously great accounts. Walmart's on a whole nother level, like in terms of just how massive they are. It is on leaps and bounds on another level from the other two that we just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think that we spent the lion's share of the conversation on Walmart, but kind of broadened it out a little bit towards every single other channel. You have Club that's performing extremely well.
Yep.
Around COVID-19 right now, because people are going there a lot more to kind of do their stocking up or just buy the quote unquote essentials, or just the items they like the best.
Right.
Anybody that's in that spot, you are getting a ton of volume from that. So if it's at Sam's Club or Costco, you're getting a ton of value out of that. You also are getting a lot of volume from the grocery stores. So being in Hy-Vee with your brand and how they're building out a lot of their like healthy living sections or whatever they kind of call theirs specifically, but the each one is really looking at it as adding square footage, but also really like deepening the specific products in each one. So it's not necessarily just that one, say, peanut butter, functional peanut butter, or like a fat burner. It's like now we have 4 or 5 different options. It's like we're having those kind of broadening or maturing of the categories that are happening, and it does create more opportunities for people to get on shelf. And I think bringing it back to like the rooting these brands on, I know a lot of times competition's competition, but you also need to consider, like, if you plan on following in the footsteps of a lot of these brands, you should be rooting them on. You should be hoping that they do well. Not to the point where, they take up every slot, but you want to make sure that, they do well enough that those merchandisers feel confident when you come in the door, because then you can use that as an example. Like, hey, we are beating this brand that you guys have on shelf in X other markets, in these specialty stores or whatever it is. When you have those conversations, it makes it a lot easier, because they're like, well, that's still doing really great in our store, so maybe we should have yours also on stock. If that brand was not doing any good, it doesn't matter how well you try to sell yourself. They're not going to, give you an opportunity.
That conversation, what you just said, sounds a lot like the conversation we had around about licensing, right? Like if you're going to bring Sour Patch Kids on, the industry should have been Root and Ghost on, because if they could do that correctly and behave correctly and make sure that was successful, that opened the door for all the other brands to finally, get collaborations and authentic licensing deals. Same thing here. You shouldn't be rooting for the door to be creaked open. You should be rooting that Aaron and Redcon kick that fucking door down. Like, kick it down and let people into that channel and make it be okay. Like, so competition is amazing. We need it. But at the same time, I think as somebody who has a competitive set myself now, I look at what my competitors do and I applaud them for things that I think move our space forward in the right direction, because I didn't do it, so nobody else is doing it. Redcon's doing it. So if you have aspirations of potentially being there someday, or you'd like to be there someday, put your pom-poms on, get your little skirt on, start doing backflips like Josh Shaw did back in high school, and that's how he got his free college education. He was a male cheerleader, and say, go, 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 Redcon. Go, go, go. And I'm not sure when that's funny, right, Josh? See, I'm a comedian.
Yeah.
But when this happens, like, I'm going to be paying close attention to it. I will cover every detail on Fitness Informant because I think it's extremely important. And if my followers are like, why are you covering stuff in Walmart? there's a huge reason for it, because this is going to make the industry, I think, better as a whole and be more accessible to people. Like, you want some of these brands you always talk about, like, oh, they're so small, they can't expand. Well, if you want accessibility, then we need to give them accessibility. And there's nothing more accessible than, besides Amazon, than Walmart, Walmart.com.
Yeah, for our category to have more square footage in some of these, the biggest retailers out there, is super important. It provides a social proof to the industry as a whole. I always talk about social proof like reviews and stuff, but if you're thinking about this as like a badge of honor, if you have some really strong selling SKUs sitting in Walmart's, Target's, Costco's, you're doing something and everybody has to look at that. And then it's kind of the follow the leader mentality. Everybody else has to fall in line and say, oh, well, we need to stock more. We need to do more of this merchandising. And then that just creates a snowball effect, because as more eyeballs can see it, it's in better areas of the store, it's in more prominent sections, you have more consumers that naturally just pick it up. It's kind of the similar Bang effect. Like, if you think about that, like, it started out very niche, and it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew. Now you see your high school friends that have never picked up a barbell in their life or whatever, they're picking up Bang like it's the best thing they've ever had in their lives. And it's all over Walmart. It's all over every single retail location that you could even think of. That's eventually where you want all this to go. Now, some people might be on the opposite side and say, like, well, I don't want that to happen. I want us to stay in this niche world of like the underground. And to them, I just, say good luck to you, because it's not going to work out that way. I do want to end, I know we're getting kind of to the end of this episode, but I want to make a mention around, we're talking physical retailers, and we're talking, as this is going to be a very big move, but I want every brand that's listening to this, or anybody that's listening to this, realize that if you are going to start and you're going to go down this path, do not lose your kind of focus on the digital channel. And I'm saying that because every single one of these physical retailers are leaning in heavy into their digital experience. So you still need to understand, how do I build a community? How do I drive traffic places? How do I build a brand in a digital sense? And because all that's going to be important regardless of if you're on shelf or not. Each day, less and less consumers go into the store. And because of that, they choose to go through the online world, and they choose not to be a part of the rest of that kind of like process of picking, packing, and driving it home. They want to get all that stuff done for them. So you need to still be able to do all that, regardless if you have your ambitions of doing Walmart or Target or whatever. Each one of their days, their business becomes more digital. And if you're not able to pull those levers the right way and drive traffic digitally, you're not going to win there. So it's one of those things to like keep your eye on the prize long term. Still, don't drop all of those things you've been doing just because you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And you're like, I have some shots on shelf.
Yeah, if anything, my last year when I was at Mills, we allocated the most funds we ever allocated ever to the Amazon channel, to the digital world, because we didn't have a direct-to-consumer model at General Mills. But we took money away from certain channels like Walmart brick and mortar and put it into Walmart.com, and put more money into Shipt, and put more money into Instacart. And digital platforms is where the money went. And that, as a brand, yes, it is amazing to get into Walmart, but figure out what you need, what kind of chunk of money you need for Walmart.com to support that, because they still operate essentially in silos a little bit. Like, they do have their different departments, and they each need their budgets. So, and the last thing I want to end on is, you mentioned Bang and how it kind of grew, and they have pallets at Walmart. Now, the niche sports nutrition audience is going to look at that and say, now it's uncool. Now Bang isn't as cool as it once was. But you know who doesn't give a shit? Jack Owak. You know who doesn't give a shit? Jack Owak's pocket, his wallet, his mansion, whatever the hell that thing costed. And same with like Aaron and people. Like, are you going to alienate a small portion of the buying audience, the 5% of the buying audience? Who gives a shit? At the end of the day, like, if that's the set, I mean, yes, you want to please them, but if they're no longer going to buy you because you're in Walmart, then they weren't a brand loyalist in the first place. So you can move on from that. If you guys like this podcast, hit that subscribe button, write us a review, write us a comment over at YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. You can follow us on all those channels as well. You can follow Josh at J Shaw Consulting. You can follow us at Fitness Informant. Love to hear feedback. And also, I'd love to hear from brand owners, too. I mean, if this is a pitch that they're interested in, and what you think about brands going into this space, and if you are truly being a cheerleader for them to advance our industry forward. Because, hey, the bigger we get, the more money we all can make, too, right? And we all want to provide the best type of living we can provide for ourselves, our families, and others involved.